Welcome to our Gifts of God program today, the Sunday Talk. And I'm so glad you're here for this. And as you know, Sandra and I have been on the road for 7 weeks. And it used to be we were on the road for maybe 10 weeks or 12 weeks. And now I'm realizing the older I get, the shorter I want these sojourns to be, right? So 7 weeks was about my max, and really glad to be home with all of my tools and lighting and computer stand and all that stuff. It just makes our online work much easier when we're home. So we're back into the regular podcasts. I think these last few days, the last 4 or 5 ones have been on this section in the text. Of course, we're going through the text, the obstacles to peace. It's such an important section in the text, maybe one of the most important sections. So we're giving it a lot of attention and we're taking it very slowly. This section 4 has 4 parts, and each part is like 3 or 4 pages long. And so we've been trying to break it down and give each part its full podcast attention. It's interesting to see why we block the peace. The first obstacle said, it's our desire to get rid of it. Well, if you ask most people about, especially spiritual people, what is it you would like to have in your life? And they would say, well, I would like to have this peace of mind and this divine connection. And then the Course says, well, yes, you can say that, but you have this other desire to get rid of peace, almost like an addiction to conflict. And when the peace comes, it's actually less comfortable to have a sustained peace in our familiar ego mind than it is to have conflict, struggle, strife, problems, etc. We're more familiar with the struggle and the strife and the conflict and the problems than we are with the peace. So when peace arrives, we have this kind of inner rejection. I don't know, it's all subconscious, but it's this kind of inner rejection of peace. Like we don't value it, or we don't stay with the attention needed to stay in the peace, right? So that was the first obstacle, the desire to get rid of peace. And then the second one was, thinking that we're bodies and identifying with our body very heavily, which we all do. It's almost impossible to be in a body and not identify with it. But it was saying like, well, yes, you identify with your body as yourself, but you also have this fear of death. That was the next obstacle. So you identify with the body and all the things that go with that, and the survival of the body and the pleasure of the body. But then you can't avoid this other belief that, well, that's all going to come to an end sometime with death. So we have this kind of fear of death, but also attraction to it. So how does this work? And then with all that going on, I haven't read the next section in the podcast, but the next section is the fear of God. So we've actually, the ego has developed this fear of its own divine contact. I thought we'd look at that a little more closely today. So I had it pulled up here. Let me just see. Yeah, this is the fourth obstacle to peace, the fear of God. It says, what would you see without the fear of death? That was the third obstacle to peace, is the attraction to death, but also the fear of death. What would you see without the fear of death? What would you feel and think if death held no attraction for you? Very simply, you would remember your Father, the creator of life, the source of everything that lives, the Father of the universe and the universe of universes, and everything that lies even beyond them would you remember. As this memory rises in your mind, peace must still surmount a final obstacle, after which is salvation completed and the Son of God entirely restored to sanity. For here your world does end. Now it says your world, not the divine world. It said your world would end. The fourth obstacle to be surmounted hangs like a heavy veil before the face of Christ. Yet as his face rises beyond it, shining with joy, because he is in his Father's love, peace will lightly brush the veil aside to run and meet him and join with him at last. For this dark veil, which seems to make the face of Christ himself like to a leper's, and the bright rays of his Father's love that light his face with glory, appear as streams of blood, fades. This fades in the blazing light beyond it when the fear of death is gone. Well, that's making a reference to the crucifixion and also death, our own death. So where do we stand with this? Desire to get rid of peace, identification with the body, then our attraction to death, and then because of all of that above, we have a fear of the ultimate release, which would be our relationship with our Creator. So we have this fear of this relationship. I think the study of the Course in Miracles itself is, of course, a spiritual practice. And we can say, well, we have these blocks, right? We can always say that. We have these blocks to full enlightenment, being absorbed in our divine connection. And by studying the Course in Miracles, it makes it very specifically clear what the blocks are. We may not want to look at them at first, but it defines them quite succinctly. What are these blocks? In the beginning, it says, well, this is a required course and you can decide when to take it, and it can't really teach you the meaning of love, but it can remove the blocks to the awareness of love's presence. You know how that all starts. Well, then it spends like a couple thousand pages pointing out to you how many blocks you have and the necessity of removing those blocks. It starts saying fear is a block, guilt is a block, anger is a block. Then you have grievances, you have special relationships, where you have these expectations of getting things from others. Those are special relationships. And then if you don't get those things, then you have grievances, attack thoughts, um, dissatisfactions, disillusionments, all that. And it defines all those very well in the Course. I think if it hadn't been Dr. Schucman who scribed the Course, it wouldn't be so succinct on all those psychological pitfalls that we fall into. She studied psychology, quite seriously for quite a few years before Jesus ever came to her and said, I want you to write this Course in Miracles. Well, why? Because she knew how the mind deceives itself. She knew how the mind worked. She knew the common pitfalls that people have that put them into depressions and dysfunctions and divorces and conflicts, all those things that are so common to living and so common to relationships. Dr. Schucman had studied all those psychological causes of those things. So when Jesus came and said, well, I want you to write this Course in Miracles, lo and behold, she already knew a lot about what it was he was going to communicate because she'd studied psychology. And he said, well, the problems of this age are psychological issues, and they're problems of the mind. And they're problems of faith, but then faith uses the mind to, faith is like this kind of lofty concept in the mind that you have to go through the different, levels in the mind to get there, but it's ultimately still part of the mind, faith. So he was very good at defining the pitfalls of the ego, and Dr. Schucman was very familiar with them. So she pretty much understood what he was talking about and was able to take it down. So we have to be grateful that we live in an age where that kind of clarity came. I was, in 1976 when it was published. I was in my 20s and ready to receive it, but I didn't receive it for 10 years. I didn't really get it until 1985 when I met Sandra, and she talked about the Course in her loving relationships trainings, and that's when I got introduced to it. And then it's been like a close relationship ever since. There might have been a couple years where I didn't look at it that seriously, between 85 and 89. But then once I met Tara Singh in 89, that became my main spiritual sadhana, they would call it in India, practice. It is a spiritual practice to do the lessons every day. And now I'm finding that the main spiritual practice I have now is doing the podcasts and connecting with you guys, gals, and that is a necessary step. Like, Sandra often says this line, nothing real can be increased except by sharing. I think somewhere in the Course, she paraphrases it, but somewhere in the Course it says that when you come upon a truth, the truth is strengthened by your sharing it. And maybe even your understanding of it is enhanced by sharing it. Maybe without the sharing, you don't have the real understanding of it. it's too intellectual, it's too up in your head. And Tara Singh used to talk about that all the time. He would say, well, is it your realized truth? We can all read about the truth, and the Course in Miracles presents the truth very clearly. Babaji's teachings present the truth very clearly. Amaji's teachings present the truth very clearly. So it's not hard to go find, quote unquote, the truth. But now the realization of the truth is where the challenge is, if you will. It's like, is it my truth? Is it my truth? Like the Course would say, love holds no grievances, right? That's lesson 68. Love holds no grievances. Well, is it my truth that the love that I know holds no grievances? Well, then you soon find out that you have a lot of grievances towards a lot of people, and therefore that love that it's talking about that holds no grievances is not realized in you. You haven't risen to it, you haven't realized it, you haven't applied it, you haven't grounded it in your being where it actually extends from you. And that's the ultimate truth. When you have the truth and it's realized in you, it will extend something. And that's what Sandra means when she said, well, nothing real can be increased except by sharing it. Well, that would be the extension. That would be, what is it you're extending? And that's kind of a natural thing. That doesn't take an effort. When you're ready, it will extend. Or when you have realized whatever that truth is, it will automatically extend. So, there's this saying that Taraji always loved. He said, well, a tree is known by its fruit, right? A tree is known by its fruit. So when an apple tree gets to a certain, maturation, it matures, it grows up, it has its season, and just in the right season, it produces like thousands of apples. So it extends itself, and that is effortless. It doesn't have to work hard. It just is in the natural flow of, the air, the atmosphere, the earth, the water, the rain, everything is just a cycle of natural order. And it's in that cycle of happening, and it's growing perfectly every step of the way, from the seed in the ground to the 40-foot tall apple tree. And then at some point it just like, boom, it has this extension of apples. Well, it's fully realized at that point. And that's kind of how we are. It's like we're perfect in our development all steps of the way, even though we have these little I don't want to call them impurities, but lessons to learn, let's just say. We have all these lessons to learn, and we haven't learned them all yet. And then at some point in being a student of the Course in Miracles, you learn more of the lessons, you give up more of your grievances, you let go of your attack thoughts, you let go of your fears, you see that even though you made mistakes, you're still innocent. All these things that you make contact with as a student of the Course over the years reaches kind of a crescendo, like it all comes together. And then at some point, your tree bears fruit, right? So the apples come and boom, there it is. And then you gladly give the apples. Like the apple tree doesn't really care who gets the apples, right? It could be birds. They could fall on the ground and fertilize the ground, or it could be a farmer or whatever. But it is going to produce it and extend it no matter what the conditions. So we get to that point as students of the course. You have to extend it. It's like your study of it, your realization of it, your actualization of it comes to this kind of height, and then it just naturally goes out, it extends. And then you wouldn't think of holding grievances, even when shit happens, right? Or even when somebody does a bad thing to you, or you make a mistake and you say something and maybe that was off. And so you don't use that as a way to condemn yourself, and you don't use the actions of others to condemn them. And you're kind of in this, it's like a grace. It's kind of like bullets bounce off. Nothing affects you. The external doesn't affect you so much. You love what you're doing. You're showing up to engage with people. You're not in a cave somewhere pretending to be enlightened. You're out there engaged, and that extension is actually increasing your awareness, your realization of the lessons. And that's a wonderful place to be. I've kind of felt that way, especially recently, I think, since the pandemic, since we've been doing more work online, since we've been traveling, maybe less, but going deeper in our own process. And maybe that was necessary to be home more, to be looking at our own process, So that's been very helpful. And I realized in this last European tour, the balance of that, home time, actual meetings with people where we're doing workshops in person, and then this online work we do that's getting very regular and getting also effortless. Like we were able to keep up mostly. I know there were some Sunday Gifts of God meetings that we canceled because the timing was like a workshop was ending on Sunday and we needed to be with the organizer and that kind of thing. So if that was an inconvenience, I apologize for that. But now that we're home, the Sunday gatherings can happen on a regular basis. And we'll be home until October. We're going to Babaji's ashram in October, the first week in October, and you're all invited. It's actually going to be a little mini quest to Colorado. We're calling it the Colorado Quest, and we're going to spend 7 days in Colorado, 5 of them at the ashram during the Navratri, the Divine Mother Festival. And we're going to breathe every day, and we're going to stay in condos nearby, so we'll have all of our comforts and amenities. No bivouacking at the ashram. We're going to have our own condos, and Sandra will be happy. So we're going to do that in October, but until then, we will be here in Washington. Yeah, I want to really deeply understand these obstacles to peace. I think if we all committed ourselves to understanding those, what they are, how they're working in us, not just an intellectual understanding. I mean, we all can read it, get the words, and agree or disagree, but where the crux of the matter is asking ourselves those questions. Well, do I do that? Are those blocks, are those obstacles to peace operating in me? And then observe that closely. How is it that I try to get rid of peace? I mean, there's a lot of different ways people do that, you know. It could be in their work. They don't like the people they're working with, or they don't like the environment they're working in. Could be with their relationships, you know, their mate. Oh, that little thing she does really irritates me. Yeah, so there's a lot of obstacles to peace that we impose on ourselves. So I think what these last few days of looking at those and reading those, it's a good opportunity for introspection. It's a good opportunity for self-observation. You know, how do I spend my day? How much peace have I embraced? And how much peace have I rejected, you know, through my tendencies, you know, some of which are conscious, some of which are not conscious. So it's always turning the view, if you will, the observation around. So it's coming back around, and now we're turning that quality of attention on ourself, not in an analytical way, but in a very loving way, and asking, you know, where is it I need to let go? You know, one of the things that happened on the European tour, and I thought I was handling it. I was doing what I could. Sometimes on the road, you're eating and your food and all of that, it's kind of a bit up in the air, and you're depending on other people, and you're in strange environments, and you don't know where everything is. So you're kind of eating on the run or this and that. So your food can get thrown off. But I had this plan, right? Oh, I was going to eat one meal a day, and I was going to feel really good, and everything was going to be just fine. Well, I don't know what happened. I did try to stay on the one meal a day thing, but when I got home, you know, got on the scale, and I was feeling very bloated, very kind of, I don't know, just bloated, you know, that feeling. So I get on the scale, and I'm like, oh my God, it's like 10 pounds more than when I left, you know? It should have been the other way, because I was eating so much less than I normally do. And then I'm looking and I'm saying, well, it's a combination of a lot of things. It's like the food being not on a regular basis, and also the travel and the stress of the travel. And, you know, you're a week here, then you got to pick up stakes and go another place. And so I had to admit to myself, well, you know, as much as I love the tours, there's an aspect of it that's stressful, and that manifested in gaining 10 pounds, so to speak. So when I got home, I like kind of put my foot down and said, okay, all right. So I'm doing what I need to do to handle that. And it is reversing, and I am feeling better, and we're back on our regular meals at certain times a day, and we're doing our walks in the morning along the river. And so things are coming back into balance. And I'm not making myself too wrong for the stress of the road and, having to kind of backtrack and reboot. And I think we all have those periods where we have to kind of get a hold of ourselves, reboot, and come up with a simple, action. And that's reestablishing peace. Somehow we're not fully there, We're not fully there at the absolute peace that the Course in Miracles is introducing us to. And why not? What is it we're doing or not doing? Yeah, why not? So that's where the application comes in. That's where the realization of the truth. And I think the extension of the truth, or this sharing of it, like some of the connections we made with people on the road were deeper than we ever made. And in all the stops. And that was wonderful to feel that. We have people in Spain, we have people in Denmark, Amsterdam, Estonia, and our last stop, we were in Latvia. We had gone there once before, but this time it was something special. We made super contact with not only the organizer, who was exceptional, but also the people who came to our workshop. It was all ladies. We didn't have one man in the workshop other than me. And there was something about that I think was beautiful to observe. And what I observed was the Latvian ladies, and we had one from Lithuania, Gulera's from Lithuania. Those Baltic state ladies are very much into their feminine power, and not in power, but it's totally their feminine power. It's not being powerful, acting like men, right? So a lot of Western ladies have power, but they're still in the male model, right? Oh, they've copied the male model and they're doing all those things. And so therefore they rise and they have the power. But in the Baltic states, the ladies, they don't care about that. They just want to awaken their sort of goddess energy somehow. And that comes through. It comes through. I experience it. And because I live with one 24/7, right? I live with a lady like that. And it was nice to see some other ladies like that in these Baltic states. So that was really wonderful to end on that. And then I felt the connection, and I felt like I could share a lot deeper when we talked about the Course in Miracles. And the other thing I did on this tour that I haven't been doing in a while, I started painting again. So maybe some of you have seen some of those images on Facebook and so forth. But I painted the Divine Mother in Spain, and then a Babaji on Tenerife. And then, let's see, I didn't paint in Amsterdam or Denmark, but then I painted another very powerful Babaji in Estonia, and another one in Latvia. And some ladies bought the one in Latvia for their center. So I felt kind of rebooted in that painting mode. And I'm inspired to finish a couple works I have going here at home. So, and I've got the space to do it, 2 months. So I feel really good about that. Yeah, so then, and also this, getting back to the podcast, The Obstacles to Peace. Especially the one today, it was like the attraction of death. And I said to Sandra, I don't know if you've listened to it yet, but Sandra's been teaching for years about this unconscious death urge, she calls it. That was what it was called in Rebirthing in the very beginning when they started. Leonard Orr had these, what he called 5 biggies that block us from bliss or block the awareness of happiness. And, one was our birth trauma, one was how our parents disapproved of us, one was our most negative thought about ourselves. We call it the personal lie. And the 4th one was the unconscious death urge. Well, lo and behold, this section today in the course was talking exactly about that unconscious death urge. Sometimes we're not so unconscious about it. We actually have, I don't want to be here thoughts, right? So sometimes it's not so unconscious, but for the most part, we keep it suppressed. And today's section was looking at that. And how do we overcome that? Well, how do we overcome that? Without it being a kind of a thin glossing over, We want to actually unearth this unconscious death urge, look at it, and be free of it. And we actually want to have happiness and longevity, and that's our purpose in life. I sometimes listen to this teacher, Esther Hicks. I actually do like her work. We're in a little different styles in how we teach. But she says this one thing: your main purpose in life is to feel good. And, when you look at the simplicity of that, the Course is saying the same thing. God's will for me is perfect happiness, right? Lesson 101. So they're saying, Esther is saying the same thing. Course in Miracles is saying that our purpose here is to be productive and extend, like the apple tree, something that is beneficial to all the people around us, and also be in a state of ultimate joy in doing that. And that flow, the end result would have to be peace. So if you're in the flow and you're not in your case, so to speak, your traumas from the past, your negative thoughts about yourself and others, your history, your family histories of this and that, that we all went through, and rising above it all, hopefully. And then this last ditch, unconscious death urge, that's enough to be liberated from. Really. That's enough to be liberated from. And if we're not liberated from those things, then we have the obstacles to peace. Desire to get rid of it, identifying with the body, attracted to death, but at the same time, we're going to fear it, fear the death, but also be attracted to it, to sabotage ourselves. And then this last obstacle, I haven't read the whole thing, but it's like our disconnection from our source, fear of God. Fear of God. And I think that for me, the holy relationship was the most important factor. If I ascended at all, I think I did a little. If I ascended at all, it was through my relationships. And I think that's the truth for everyone. I think of this lesson 246, to love my Father is to love his Son, right? It comes right after your peace is with me, Father, I am saved, 245. Then it says, to love my Father is to love his Son. All right, which means basically you can't love God without loving people first. It's not a like go into a cave kind of a thing, you know? You don't get enlightenment going into a cave. You get the ultimate enlightenment in your holy relationships with people. And that's where you're tested. That's where you're given the lessons. That's where you're given the miracles in those relationships. That's where you're given the miracles. So I had a little miracle, and it was kind of funny, but it was at the same time so heartwarming. We arrived in Latvia, and our organizer picked us up at the airport, and so she had a nice car, a nice new Tesla, and we got all our bags in there nicely. And then when we started out, she handed me this little packet, right? And it had every person signed up for the workshop on a spreadsheet, had their mobile number, had their email, had what they paid. You know, this lady's a businesswoman, so she knows what a Excel sheet looks like, right? A spreadsheet. So she had all that information, all the, times of our private sessions and who's coming and what they paid. And it was all laid out in these very immaculate spreadsheets. And she just handed me this and said, well, here's your work for the next week. And I can't tell you how much I've wished for that every place we go, to have an organizer that's that organized and that clear. And there it was, right? And the reason I liked that was because, after the week is over, and now you're trying to put your finger on, well, who came and who can you put in your mailing list that would want to be there? Well, of course, the people that came to your workshop. Well, you've got to have all their emails and their contacts and all that. And to retrieve that after the fact is not so easy, right? So she had it all laid out before. And I was saying, well, wow, this is wonderful. This is what I've been wishing for. But, oftentimes it's very tedious work to do those spreadsheets, right? So not every organizer wants to spend that time and do that work because it's tedious, and you got to check and recheck. Well, either she did it herself or she had somebody do it, but it was perfect. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is what I've been praying for. And there it was. And so anyhow, I ended our European tour on a very good note, and we did very well in Latvia, and I felt good. And so I was shown that there's grace. I was shown that there's grace, and grace wants you to feel good. Grace wants you to have a happy day, right? Later on, there's another very important section in the text. It's called the Rules for Decision. Rules for Decision. You should all look into that. It's a later chapter. And it says, well, the first decision you need to make when you get up in the morning is to have a happy day. That should be your first decision. And then the second, well, first it says you cannot make any decisions by yourself. So, which means you need to make decisions with the Holy Spirit. You have to have that contact, right? You have to have that vertical contact in your life with a power greater than yourself, and trust in that power, and that power is leading you somehow, and helping you make these decisions in life. You cannot make decisions by yourself. So basically it's saying the only good decision to make is when you know you're consulting those higher forces and the actions in your life are directed by that holy relationship that you establish. So don't try to make any decisions without that, it says. You cannot make decisions by yourself. All right, then it says, you get up in the morning, what's your first decision? Well, it's to have a happy day. Sounds kind of simple, doesn't it? But you would be surprised how much we sabotage that. And then it says, well, if you go in your day and it's going the wrong way and you're not happy and there's conflict, then you have to admit you're wrong and that you tried to make a decision by yourself. Otherwise, if you made a decision with the Holy Spirit, it would only produce happiness. So if it's not producing happiness, that means you're doing something on your own that's contrary to what this spiritual alignment would have you do. And it's obviously not giving you the happy day. So it's not the Holy Spirit leading you that way. It's your ego leading you that way. And therefore you have to admit you're wrong. And you have to reboot and reestablish this connection with this power that helps you make the right decisions that will result in happiness. All right. So that's a very important section. I think you all ought to look it over. And, you know, sometimes in my tutelage with Tara Singh, I would be at the foundation. And of course, I'd be going to his lectures in the morning and in the evening, but sometimes we'd have these personal exchanges, right? And I remember sometimes they would not be much words, you know, we wouldn't talk a lot, but there would be something transmitted. And then sometimes Tara Singh would point out to me certain things in the course that were very important. Like one time he told me, read lesson 97. And another time he told me, read these rules for decisions. So he would kind of direct me toward very key parts of the course, meaning bring those into application, kid. Here they are, and they can guide you, but you got to master them. And so, and then one of them was this section, the obstacles to peace. He pointed that one out to me one time and said, this is very important to get what's in here. And so in that way, I would receive his teachings that he would be talking, but sometimes in private, he would be giving me other things. So I would get the lessons that way. And then when we traveled together, I'd get the deepest lessons where all my subconscious material would come up and he would just cut it off, you know? And those lessons were not always easy, but those were some of the greatest lessons I ever had in life. And now I see how fortunate I was to have those opportunities.